Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Oh, there's a big flap going on about Shadeur Sanders. Was he arrogant in his interviews? What does it mean for the draft, which is still over a month and a half away? We'll get to that. There's a trade that happened 52 years ago today. I would challenge you to come up with a trade that is wilder than this one. And we will go into great detail on that in the 10 o'clock hour. Also, the Dallas Mavericks, pour one out for them. Oh, my God. Talk about a combination of poor decisions and bad luck. It has left them in an absolute mess. We will get to that and a whole lot more. And, of course, there's a lot of post-combine yak to talk about and the Deebo Samuel trade and everything else that's going on in the NFL because, well, the NFL owns the sports calendar, you know. We're getting ready to head into March Madness. That should be at the top of the headlines. We got NBA season winding down towards the playoffs. Alex Ovechkin, 11 goals away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's record. But the National Football League owns the calendar. As Albert Brooks said in the movie Concussion, they own a day of the week. Yes, they do. So that continues to dominate the news, but I want to follow up here on the end of the MASN deal, and I say the end of the MASN deal because I think what happened the other day is going to lead to the end of MASN entirely. The Orioles, I don't think, are going to just operate the network for themselves. They needed the Nats to make that work. It has not been working for a long time. The court battles are now over. And Tom Libero has got an interesting look at it today in the Washington Times in that this deal to get the Nats essentially out of it, they're going to be on MASN this year, but next year they're free to negotiate wherever they want to go. That was engineered in large part by the commissioner, Rob Manfred. He finally got this thing off of where it was because, this goes back 20 years when Peter Angelos was claiming, and ultimately in court he would have lost, but he was a very famous lawyer and he would have been able to tie this up for a long time. But he said, oh, no, the Washington area is my territory too. It's not just Baltimore. No, that's my market. That's not true. As a matter of fact, when the St. Louis Browns moved to Baltimore in 1954, the Washington Senators welcomed them, even though they were in the same league, the American League, because they thought it would create a rivalry. They didn't worry about losing attendance to a team in Baltimore. I guess people didn't travel the way they do now, and it wasn't such an easy trip down 95 to get to Washington or up 95 to get to Baltimore. So they didn't really worry about it. But Angelos just said, no, it's mine. So in order to appease him, they said, okay, we're going to give you the broadcast rights to the two teams. And it was a deal so tilted in his favor, it was insane. He was getting 90%, and that would ramp up over the years till they got to the Nationals owning a third of it. But as Libero writes here, Major League Baseball's concession to Angelos caught everyone in Washington by surprise. Like, I thought we were going to be able to make our own deal once we got to Washington. Oh, no, you weren't. In the meantime, the Nationals have never gotten a stadium naming rights deal, even though they've been in the new ballpark. I say new ballpark, the ballpark since 2008. No jersey patch sponsorship. And Libero talked to Mike Carney, who's the head of naming rights and those sort of things for the Nationals. And he said, summertime is when the Nats are at the top of the mind for our fan base, and we think that's the perfect time to make an announcement, meaning sometime this summer they're going to announce both. They're going to have a naming rights for the stadium and a jersey patch deal. The Lerner family, Libero writes, has turned down numerous stadium rights proposals over the years, and the brands, as Carney said, weren't the right fit. Whoever the club chooses to partner with this time must demonstrate, as Carney says, shared values. And as Libero says, this from a baseball team that sold stadium signage and naming rights for their luxury club behind home plate in 2022 to a cryptocurrency company that went belly up a few months after the team signed a $38 million deal. At least they got the money up front. These are true learner shared values. Well, what could go wrong? The bigger point that's made here about the television rights and where they go, where they're free to make a deal next year. You've heard various things thrown around. I even heard like NBC might want to get involved in this. The ESPN, as you know, is out of the baseball business with ESPN. In case you missed this, they were paying $550 million a year to Major League Baseball, and they came to Rob Manfred and said, we need you to take a 60% haircut. We want you to go from $550 to $200 million, and Manfred walked. So this is going to be the last year that baseball will be on ESPN. The television rights deal, what apparently is in the works, especially with ESPN and Major League Baseball parting ways, is that Rob Manfred is hoping to round up all the teams that don't have big television deals like the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Red Sox and the Cubs and the Mets and do it, sort of like the NFL does it. Like you would put all the games on the MLB network, but you would send the particular games to the markets that would be interested in them. Mets are playing the Nationals. I guess the Mets would be blocked out in New York because they have their own network. But you take two teams that don't have rights deals, and they go to those two markets and so forth and so on. And because Manfred was, as he says, instrumental in making this deal, he would be the one probably to put it together. This is what Libero writes at the end of the column. David Rubenstein, who purchased the Orioles from the Angelos family in March of 2024, met with Mark Lerner at one point to discuss the Nationals' MASN issues, but that meeting, like many negotiations with the Lerners, went nowhere. It took Rob Manfred to finally step in. For that, extricating the Nationals from MASN control, the commissioner may expect some cooperation with his rights venture. So I would bank on that. And, if there is no deal to be made, I'm sure Ted wants it. And look, Ted needs baseball, not just for summertime programming, but here's what else is going on with his monumental network. The cable companies are looking to put them on a paid tier. Like right now, if you get Xfinity or Comcast, you get that in your package. What they're looking to do is to put them on like an HBO type of tier. Like, okay, you want Xfinity cable, that's fine, but you're going to have to pay extra, $10, $15 a month extra to get the Monumental Network. And Monumental Network in the summertime is bupkis. It's a few Mystics games and like cricket. And so, nobody's going to want to have that in the summertime. And at the moment, until somebody like Cooper Flagg shows up, the Wizards are unwatchable. And the Capitals, while they're good and the Ovechkin chase is interesting, hockey is a niche sport. There's not as wide a market for it as there are for the other mainstream sports. Wizards get good, maybe it's a different story. But right now, you're looking at, maybe 75 nights a year where there's real interest, and that's hockey interest in what's going on his network. All right, back, and we'll get to more on baseball. The payroll numbers are out. It's remarkable. The Mets payroll this year, $333 million. The Nationals payroll, $200 million less, and they're not even close to the bottom. The bottom is, it's surprising. The A's are going to play in a minor league ballpark in Sacramento. They're at $66 million. $66 million, and you got these teams at the top. Between the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the Mets, they're all $249 million and up. $249 million and up at the top, $66 million at the bottom. There's more and more discussion about a salary cap, and with a salary cap, you get a floor. And the floor will not be $69 million. So it may be in the player's best interest, even with all the grandstanding they do about never accepting a cap, might be in their best interest to get it. Deebo Samuel, Booger McFarland, yesterday on the Get Up show with an analysis of what he will mean to the Commanders.
This was a really good move because what Washington is trying to do is they're trying to cook a great meal. And so when you cook a great meal, Greeny, you got to go out and get the ingredients. It doesn't mean that every piece that you get is going to be the main course. It just means that piece you're getting is going to fit somewhere on the meal. And I like where Deebo is going to fit. if you understand their offense, it's about getting the ball out of Jaden Daniels' hands quick. They run a ton of screens. What is Debo really good at? He's good at running after the catch. And so I like Debo as a piece. With that being said, I still think they need a number 2 receiver to Terry McLaurin. As much as I like De'Ami Brown, he ain't the answer. He's a good number 3. They need a solid number 2 or even a 1B to Terry McLaurin, because Debo is going to be a gadget piece, I think, with screens and underneath and run after catch. But they need somebody to get down the field along with Terry McLaurin.
So, yeah, they need another receiver, according to Booger. And you're hearing that from others, including Sam Fortier, who had an analysis of the deal yesterday in the Post and points out that Debo is more than just a skinny wide receiver. He runs the ball, too. He's got a physical style, big yards after catch, things like that. But he's dealt with a bunch of injuries in the last few years. And in 2022, as he points out, Samuel, whose program weight is 215 pounds, to his own admission, played 20 pounds over that, said he was out of shape and hampered his explosiveness. Same thing last year. And he had his worst season last year since his rookie year in 2019. As you've heard, his contract is $17.5 million. And there has been some speculation that maybe they'll redo it and extend it and not take the big cap hit this year. What Fortier says is it's likely he's going to play on that salary this year, which is probably a smart move, because who plays better in a contract year than somebody in a contract year, right? I mean, he's going to be motivated to play. He's going to show up in shape. But even out of shape, last year he had 8.3 yards after catch and forced 15 missed tackles, and according to Pro Football Focus, was 12th among receivers. So that's big. He also still carries the ball. He had 42 carries last year, which is about on par with his career, but that went down from an average of 6 yards a carry to 3.2 yards a carry. I think a lot of that's going to be, how healthy he is and what kind of shape he is in. But as 48 points out, they got to get another wide receiver, and it's probably not going to be De'Ami Brown. He mentions a couple of names like Noah Brown, who could come back after the injury last year. Keenan Allen is out there, Hollywood Brown, Darius Slayton. Those guys are all available. Also, on the defensive side of the ball, the Myles Garrett speculation. Wants out of Cleveland. Cleveland says they're not going to trade him. He's probably going to be traded. Andrew Whitworth is now an analyst with Prime. Played a long time in the NFL. Played till he was 40 with the Bengals and the Rams. Won a Super Bowl in his last game. And he was on yesterday on the Rich Eisen show. And while there's, we're in the speculation phase of all this. Ooh, is he going to blink? Are they going to keep him? How's this going to work? Will he get traded to the team he wants to go to? What Whitworth says is this has reached the point where it's of no return. He ain't coming back to Cleveland, and says it's behooves really the Browns to trade him.
It makes me think a little bit of Carson Palmer as well. You think of in 2011 when he really refused to come back to the Bengals and had said that he just didn't feel like they were ever going to put themselves in a position for him to really have a chance at a Super Bowl. And he refused to go back there. And I think that it's one of those things that if you're going to say that that's it and this is your plan for Myles, he's got to be willing to dig his feet in and just not show up. And an unfortunate, situation there. I hate it when these kind of situations come up, because I think at the end of the day, I think Tomlin always says it, you never want prisoners. And so you want volunteers. And so I think that really, to me, it's one of those where I think Cleveland's got to be honest with themselves, and I wish this is how it worked, but what we've really provided him and really how things have gone here and decisions that have been made. I can understand an all-world football player saying, hey, man, I want the chance to go have success. And again, we have done things that continue to put us in a situation where we're not getting there. So you got to let him go, in my opinion. And what is that compensation? What does it look like? I just think when you do right by people and you're accountable and you say, hey, you know what, we can own up for our end of it, it ends up in a good thing for everybody. And so there's a chance here when you look at the Deshaun Watson situation and really where they're at contractually, unless you think you're a Super Bowl team, which I don't think anybody would say they are. why not use this as an opportunity of how else are we going to improve our roster? How else are we going to get out of the hole we've dug ourselves, but to acquire a lot of draft capital and move on? And so for Miles, I think it's digging your feet in and saying, you know what, if his heart really believes that he needs to go somewhere else and he's not going to be his best self every day showing up bitter in this building, then you know what, go forward with it. And for Cleveland, I think you got to really look at yourself and go, hey, maybe this is the only way we get out of the hole we've dug ourselves, is by trading him, getting some draft capital, and trying to flip this entire thing as fast as possible.
He is the only one on the team that you can get multiple ones for. That's for sure.
That's it. And look at their contract situation with the cap and everything else and what they've done with Deshaun's contract. I mean, this may be their only out. And so I know they're saying they don't want to do it, but how else are you going to get this roster back to where it should be? And I think people, honestly, I don't think people will be in arms about it, because I think they're going to understand, like, Myles Garrett's frustration, because I think every Cleveland Brown fan probably has the same exact frustration.
Yeah, it's the Mike Tomlin line that he wants volunteers, not hostages. And I think that it's reached this point. Now, to Garrett's credit, he's handled this incredibly well, and he hasn't, made any, huge. He wants to be traded, but he has not said, I'm not showing up unless I'm traded. It probably could get to that point once training camp begins. But you got a team that's rebuilding. He's a guy who's approaching 30. You got to get what you can for him. And it's kind of like the Bill Parcells line. Like, once you think about retiring, you're retired. And I think in this case, once you know you want to get out, you get out. And he's already turned down their offers of a contract extension to make him the highest paid defensive lineman in the league. He wants to win. And he's looking at the Cleveland Browns and what an S show they are, and how long it's going to take them to get to be a good team. If in fact they do everything right, but they're handicapped by a lot of different issues there. So, if it comes to the point, and you're hearing Whitworth say this, it comes to the point where he does not have a trade by training camp, that he may have to hold out. And I think once he holds out, that's going to lower the leverage for the Browns. So they're doing everything right now, saying they're not going to trade him. But as we get closer and closer to camp, that window will close for them. And the reality is they're going to have to deal him. And whether they deal him here or Philadelphia, who knows? But, that could create a very interesting bidding war in the NFC East between the two teams. All right, coming up, the fallout from the Combine and how Shadeur Sanders may or may not have behaved. Was it calculated? What does it mean? We had a bunch of analysts chapping at each other yesterday, and we will get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, next hour, I'll tell you about something that's happening in town Memorial Day weekend. We got the Senior PGA Championship at Congressional, and Jackie Endsley will join us. She is the championship director for the PGA. And one of the things I want to ask her about, and, it's not going to happen, of course, but Tiger Woods turns 50 on December the 30th. And to be eligible to play on the Seniors Tour, you have to be 50. There's two things here. One, he's turning 50 in this calendar year. Two, he loves Congressional. He competed in the U.S. Open there in 1997. He was hurt 2011, so he didn't participate in that. But he held his own tournament there for a number of years. It was based around the military. He won it once or twice, and he loves to play there. I'm just wondering, if he were to call and say, I know you're supposed to be 50, but would you like to have Tiger Woods play in your tournament? Whew. That would take it from one level to the next. Now, he's really banged up. I don't even know if he's going to be able to go in the Masters. Any way he can play, he's going to find some kind of way to get there. And, to his credit, he's managed to make the cut the last few times. Just his body gives out after a couple of rounds. But the one thing about the Senior Tour is you can use a cart. You don't have to walk. And Tiger in a cart, yeah, you'd have to consider him to be a contender for sure. All right, so this little brush fire that's going on now. when you're looking at the draft, who are going to be the top quarterbacks, there's no doubt in some order it's going to be Cam Ward of Miami or Shadeur Sanders of Colorado. And so we had at the Combine the individual meetings with the teams. Now, Deion has been upfront about this with his son. It's even more transparent than what happened with the Mannings, where Archie Manning didn't want his son to play for the San Diego Chargers. So Eli Manning wound up with the Giants. The power play worked. And in this case, I would not be shocked at all if Deion said, hey, when you're interviewed by a team you don't want to play for, just don't give them all of yourself. So the latest is, and this is from Matthew Berry of NBC Sports, he talked to two people with two different teams that Shadeur met with, and they both said it was a bad meeting. He came off as unprofessional and disinterested. Both also said after the meeting they had a lesser opinion of him than prior. Okay, that's, that would go along with, if you don't want to go there, let people know you don't want to go there in a certain way. And many have interpreted Sanders as being overconfident and cocky. So there's that going on, and there's even some talk that maybe he's not even a first-round pick. Trevor Sikkema is with Pro Football Focus. He was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday with more on this.
The fact of the matter is I had him slipping out of my post-combine mock draft that I did over at PFF.com. And the reason why is because I could not find anybody that spoke with conviction with Shadeur Sanders being QB1, taken in the top 10, or even as a first-round quarterback. So to me, when I hear that and I line that up with a lot of people were talking about Cam Ward as somebody that you take that chance on, I feel like it's a one quarterback race at this point. Now, when I watch Shadeur, he plays a very clean brand of football. He understands the position very, very well. You could tell that he's been raised around the game. He understands how to read defenses, go through progressions, all of that, operate the pocket, make protection calls. He knows how to play quarterback. The reason why I'm a little bit lower on him, I gave him a late second, early third round grade, is simply because I don't know if he's got that crazy arm talent to be able to compete against the Lamar Jacksons, the Josh Allens, the Patrick Mahomes, guys like that, that the reason why you would draft a quarterback isn't in the top 10 isn't just because, hey, let's take one just because we need one. It's because you want to win a Super Bowl. You're taking a guy that high because you believe he can win a Super Bowl. Does Shadeur have the overall arm talent to match up against those guys? I don't think so. And I think as we are getting more into draft season, and the combine's a really good barometer for this, you get sort of caught up on what the league might have been thinking about these players really all along. And I think that we talked about a 2 QB race because there's so many quarterback needy teams in the top 10, but it just feels like teams are much more gravitating towards Cam Ward worthy of a top selection and Shadeur maybe something more on day 2 or the late first round.
But how much of this is the last name? That if this is just Shadeur Smith and not Shadeur Sanders, does his draft status stock change at all in your mind?
I would say that it would probably be the other way around. When you look at Shadeur, and I understand how well he played over the last couple of years and everything that he was able to do at Jackson State and then also at Colorado, I think, again, he plays a very clean brand of football. But does he have those NFL-level traits that you want as a franchise caliber quarterback? Because he lacks the overall mobility. And again, I think that he's got a mid-tier NFL-level arm strength, but it's nothing that's really special. So I wonder if it's the opposite, DP, and I wonder if it's the fact that, hey, we've been talking about Shadeur in the top 10, in the top 5, because of sort of who he is and the notoriety that he has, instead of the other way around, like we're seeing now, where it's like, oh, well, does the NFL not like him, because of his last name? And some people call it baggage. I agree with Shadeur when he said at the Shrine Bowl, he's like, I didn't know that having a supportive parent was all of a sudden a bad thing. I totally agree with him when he says that. And so I think it's much more of maybe the notoriety and him being in the public eye and us saying like, hey, if you need a quarterback, he's a quarterback in this class. And now we're just sort of catching up to it. Feels like the NFL saying, maybe not quite in the top 10, maybe something a little bit further down the line.
That's Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus. So one thing that's helping him this year is he's in this year's draft, not in last year's draft, because, of all the quarterbacks and the quarterbacks who have done well outside of J.J. McCarthy, who gets it incomplete because he got hurt in the preseason. But that quarterback class looks like a home run across the board, with Jaden Daniels at the top of the list. Shadeur's in that draft last year. And I think Dion is savvy enough to know that. That's why he said very early on, oh, no, he's not coming out because he could have come out last year. He would have spent 3 years in college and would have fulfilled that commitment and could have come out in last year's draft. And he said, oh, no. He wants to be number one. Well, it's not going to be number one. He may not even be the number one quarterback. But it's somewhere, it looks like, between, he's nowhere near the first round and where is he going to go in the first round. Matt Miller is part of the draft team at ESPN, working under the great Mel Kiper. Matt Miller yesterday on Dan's show, and his take somewhat similar to what Sigma said.
I think it's hard to find a team right now that says, yeah, that's our guy. You're crazy. And I just put an article out last week before the Combine, or during the Combine, actually, and it was ranking the quarterbacks from the past 5 years. Shadeur Sanders was second to last. Kenny Pickett was the only quarterback with a lower grade than him coming into the NFL. So that is in line with what I've seen watching the tape over the last 2 years. It's what I hear talking to as many scouts and coaches and general managers as I do this time of year. A lot of people want to like Shadeur Sanders. I don't get the feeling that teams love him. Not the way that they do Cam Ward. There's a sizable gap right now to where I think you could easily say this year there is a consensus number one quarterback, which is rare. That doesn't often happen. Even last year, with all the Caleb Williams love, there were teams that like Jaden Daniels. There were teams that like Drake May. We have a true consensus number one quarterback this year, and it's Cam Ward from Miami.
Okay, is this just football that we're talking about with Shadeur Sanders? Now, Cam Ward, we can get to him in a moment, but is there a smear campaign with Shadeur Sanders, or are people just being honest with the talent or performance that they saw?
So I think it's both. I do think that it's about football. He is 6'1". He put on some weight for the Combine. He got up to 212 pounds. He played closer to 200 pounds. He doesn't have the biggest arm. He's not the greatest athlete. I know for folks who didn't watch Colorado play, he might be Deion Sanders' son, but he got his mom's feet, right? He's not a 4'3" athlete. But he is incredibly tough, and he's incredibly accurate, and he's willing to stand in the pocket and make some plays. I do think on the other side of that is there are going to be people that are going to see players differently. I've talked to young scouts who loved their interviews with Shadeur Sanders. I've talked to older scouts and general managers who were put off by him. And I think that's going to be the case for a lot of the new era of athlete coming into the NFL, where guys are making millions of dollars in college football now. It has prepared them for life a little differently. And so I think you are going to get a disconnect. I tend to not put a ton of stock into those quotes from scouts and GMs of, we didn't like this interview. It's different if everyone tells you the same thing. I remember asking about Will Levis, and everyone I talked to said the same thing, was like, this guy is just like pent up. Like, he's trying to be a perfectionist. He's not smooth. He's not fluid. The conversations feel like he's going to have a heart attack. Well, guess what? He plays the same way on the football field. So that's when I think it matters, is when those interviews match with a play style. Shadeur's a hell of a player. There's not that love for him out there right now in the NFL.
Is Cam Ward being elevated because there is no competition? So he might.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah,
absolutely. If we were talking about last year's drafts, Cam Ward would have been the 6th or 7th guy drafted, probably at quarterback, not overall, at quarterback. And that might still make you a top 10 pick, right? Because those guys flew off the board last year. But I do think he's being elevated. It is interesting. Both quarterbacks, Sanders and Ward, they have some bad habits that are going to need coached out of them. Cam Ward's kind of get dismissed because he has a strong arm. It's like, well, he stands in the pocket way too long. He takes a lot of sacks he doesn't need to. He very often waits for the open man, but he's got a strong arm. So you kind of you make those excuses for it. Whereas I think both guys are going to need coached pretty hard when they get to the NFL, just to learn to play on time. Both guys have a little bit of that Caleb Williams mentality where they think they can stand back there and drift and wait for somebody to pop open and then they'll throw it. Well, we saw last year for Caleb, who I still love, that doesn't work in the NFL. And guys who can play on time are going to have a lot more success early. Both these quarterbacks have to figure that out.
So it's a draft that does not have a lot of quarterbacks, and these are the two that are at the top. The question is, how far are they at the top? There's another thing to throw into the stew here. And the NFL is always good at doing this. They tweak things in a certain direction. And the way the quarterback position has gone, I mean, it's insane. Dak Prescott making $60 million a year and chewing up that much of the cap doesn't really make that much sense. And the desperation for quarterbacks, where you're talking about two guys who in other drafts may not even be first-round picks, but could go both in the top 5, and Cam Ward, who's really only had one great year, which was at Miami, and started at what we used to call a Division I AA school. Incarnate Word in San Antonio, I know that. When I was there 40 years ago, it was a girls' school, all-girls school. So, they've ramped up the football program, but that's where he started out. And even Shadeur, he started out at Jackson State. It wasn't at the level he played at in Colorado, and he's good enough to be considered. But I'm just wondering, have things been tweaked a little bit in the direction for the NFL of getting away from the emphasis on the quarterback? You still need a great one to be a great team. There's no question about that. And you can feel very fortunate if you're a Commanders fan that you have Jaden Daniels. But you may have noticed yesterday that Saquon Barkley got a contract extension from the Philadelphia Eagles, which is going to make him the highest paid running back in NFL history. They signed him to a 3-year, $37.7 million deal last year, and then they signed an extension for $41 million on that, and $36 million is guaranteed. That's what used to be quarterback money. And I'm just wondering, maybe he's a unicorn. He's that good, and there won't be any other running backs who get into that stratosphere. But, the owners look at this thing. They have a lot of time to people and resources to spend on research. And are they tweaking the game in the direction towards the running back to get away from these insane quarterback salaries? I just wonder, It used to be that the running back was the one who made your team. If you had a great running back, that was what your offense was all about. Like, as great as the Steelers were with Terry Bradshaw and Lynn Swann and John Stallworth, Franco Harris was the real star of that offense. Franco Harris was the best player on that offense. Defense was even better, but the offense was based around the running game. So I just wonder if we're moving in that direction. I just get the feel that maybe they're tweaking things towards that. All right, coming up in the next hour, we will get to a trade that blows away all trades ever, and it happened 52 years ago today. That's next. It's the Andy Pollard Show, ESPN 630. Back when I was a kid, I used to read a comic strip called Al Cap, and there was a character in there named Joe Bliffspeck. He had no vowels in his name. And he walked around with a perpetual cloud over his head. It never went right for him. The Dallas Mavericks, oh my God. Wow, has this been a bad month for them. And now with Kyrie Irving out for the year, any hopes that they had of being a decent playoff team this year. They were in the finals last year. And they're an absolute mess. We'll get to more on them. But this kind of ties into a story that I want to talk about here. Isaac Kuhn-Harris is with us today, young man in his 20s. In your lifetime, would you say that the Luka Doncic trade was the most shocking that you ever saw?
100%.
Okay. So, yeah, and it's in your lifetime. And I qualify that by pointing out that in my lifetime, it doesn't come close. Because on this day in 1973, two pitchers for the New York Yankees announced that they had made a trade. They not only had traded their wives, they traded their entire families and the family pets. Yes. Oh, yes. Now, this was an odd period of time in the United States. This was not too many years removed from Woodstock and free love and all the things that were going on, plus the Vietnam War was still going on, and there was a lot of controversy about that. And, things in the country were somewhat volatile. But, sexual mores were definitely changing at that period of time, but not to the point of two players would swap wives and tell everybody about it. But that's what happened. The Yankees were in spring training in Florida, and these two guys who were friends, they were best friends and roommates, they swapped wives. The backstory behind this is absolutely incredible. The New York Daily News the next day ran this headline: two Yank pitchers trade wives. Peterson, Kelkich hurl changeups. And these were the two pitchers, Fritz Peterson and Mike Kelkich. And they had become friends. Both couples had become friends. They hung out together. And somewhere along the line, Peterson had fallen in love with Kelkich's wife, Suzanne, and Kelkich had fallen in love with Peterson's wife, Marilyn. So how did this all happen? Fritz Peterson is now gone. He died a little over a year ago, October of 2023. He was 81 years old. But about 15 years ago, he put out a book. And he was on the Boomer and Carton show on WFAN. And, of course, when you write a book, you've got to include a chapter about, the wife swap. So they spent a lot of time on this, and I'm going to play a lot of the conversation that they had about this. This was Peterson back in 2009 explaining how he came to trade wives with his friend as he appeared with Craig Carton and Boomer Esiason on WFAN.
Actually, it really did just happen. Nobody had any thoughts of this. I mean, as you say, we were the best of friends on and off the road. And at a party one night at Maury Allen, the sports writer's house, we all got together. We had a number of other people there, even a New York Met who was a Yankee at the time.
You hate the Mets, don't you?
I really do.
You really hate the Mets. Why do you despise the Mets so much?
You'll see. Read chapter 14.
All right, I'll get chapter 14. All right, so you're at Maury Allen's place. You're having a little barbecue, whatever it is. Go ahead.
And we were all drinking beer and having
good time,
hot dogs. Yeah, and it got real late, and we went out to our cars. Mike and I had come in separate cars with our wives, and we happened to be parked behind each other, right out in the in the street in front of Maury Allen's house. And I said, as we walked out, I saw Marilyn and Mike walking a little bit ahead, and I said, "Hey, Marilyn, why don't you go back?"
At the time,
Mike?
your wife is Marilyn.
Yes, my wife was Marilyn.
So you're saying to Marilyn, why don't you go with Mike?
Ride with Mike to the diner in Fort Lee where we had met before we came, and then we drove up in our regular cars. And I said, Susan will go with me, and we'll just meet you back there.
Now, there was no plan in your mind when you said that? Totally innocent?
Not at all.
All right. Why not? You're all friends, so she'll shotgun with you. Your wife will sit with Mike. Go ahead.
I mean, it was kind of exciting feeling, but there was nothing in mind, at least in my mind.
Right.
And I was surprised my wife at the time, Marilyn, agreed to it because she's from the Midwest, very conservative girl.
Is it true that you put your hand on Mike's wife's thigh while driving to the Fort Lee diner?
No.
Not true. All right. Go ahead. All right.
I don't know. I've never
seen
that.
Did you ever actually make it to the diner?
Oh, yes, we did.
You made it to the diner.
Yeah. So you go to the diner. Now, along the way, just easy conversation, nothing outlandish,
and laughing, and both Susan and my exes, Mike and Marilyn, are pretty dominant people.
Okay.
So when Susan and I were together, we didn't find any constraints about talking about anything, and we laughed, and there were no chains or anything.
Right.
And it was a lot of fun. And we ended up getting back to the diner way before they did. But we were there. Yeah, I don't think so, but I know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
I don't think
Mike
so.
Mike was getting busy with your wife.
Mike was
on the way to the diner, this no good disgraziad.
Mike was from California, so he was a little ahead of his time.
Fair enough.
And we just had a very good time, actually innocently.
Right.
And the next day we were back at the ballpark. This was a Friday, and we said, that was really fun. Let's do it again.
Meaning the driving with the other
the driving
man's wife?
and talking.
Oh, okay.
And
driving somebody.
Yeah, I'm sure Mike probably said, hey, let's do that driving thing again. Since you was probably fooling around with your wife at the time.
You mean that's where they were?
And you guys are both products, all of you are products of the 50s, basically, right?
Well,
late
60s,
40s.
yeah,
Well, I'm saying, growing up as kids, though, in a very conservative time in this country sexually.
Absolutely.
Prior to becoming adults, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, hold on for a second here. Now, hold on. You guys meet back at the diner. Now you got to drive home from the diner.
Right.
And the conversation with your wife at that time is what?
It's weird because she just fooled around with your best friend.
Yeah, she was just like,
well, I don't know. I don't know if she did or not, but I don't think we mentioned very much about it.
Right.
Maybe because we both liked it so much.
Okay, go ahead. So what was the next step? You go to the ballpark
the next
day.
Is that was really fun. Let's do it again.
All right.
So we did it again. We went to, again, Fort Lee. I think it was a steak and ale or something.
Yeah, that Fort Lee, man. I'll tell you that.
Stay away from Fort Lee, boy.
That place is crazy.
All right, go ahead.
Joyce Brothers lives there, and she made a comment about us one time. But yeah, we go back to Fort Lee the next night, Friday night.
Right.
And Susan and I stay there. And we have drinks and we eat and have a ball again. Another wonderful time.
Right.
And Mike and Marilyn went out in the car somewhere.
Right. So we know what's going on. So you were slow to the uptake. Mike was right in.
Yeah.
Head first.
Yeah,
Right.
could be.
Go. Okay. Go ahead.
So we met back in, I think, Franklin Lakes, where we lived at the time.
Right.
And then we went home again.
Right.
And again, we said, that was really fun. Let's do it again.
So you see where this is going, okay? So this is becoming a regular thing. The Petersons and the Kelkiches are going out together, but they're looking at each other's partners. Now, there was a movie that came out a few years before that named Bob and Ted and Carol and Alice, and the poster, and you can probably find it online, the poster for the movie is the four people in the bed. One of them was Diane Cannon, who later got some sports fame because she used to sit in the same seats that Jack Nicholson did during the Laker glory years, the Showtime Lakers with Magic Johnson. So maybe there's a sports connection there. But okay, so this is becoming a thing, and you know where this is heading. Now we get to the next step. This again is Fritz Peterson, who swapped wives with his teammate Mike Kelkich in 1973, announcing it on this day, and then 15 years ago appearing on WFAN to describe what happened next.
At what point, from all these dinners and drives throughout Jersey, do you and Mike look at each other and say, let's swap?
Well,
when does that happen? I want to hear that conversation. It's fascinating to me.
It was never put in those terms until later.
Okay.
But I do remember saying, let's not, either one of the couples, do it.
Right.
And,
Sex.
Right. Okay. Because I knew if that
once
happened,
you do that, you're done.
Yeah, especially me.
Right.
Because Mike was better at it than me.
Okay.
How do you know that?
Well, his wife told him. How do you think he told him?
Remember, I roomed with Mike.
Oh, so you were pretending to sleep when he was smashing out
something like that.
groupies.
Something like
that. All right,
that.
fair enough. All right, so, but then the day comes when you're obviously, you got a thing for the other gal. He's obviously got a thing for your wife at the time.
Right.
And then the four of you get together and have, let's put all our cards on the table. This is what we should all do as adults?
Kind of.
All right.
In fact, I guess there was an agreement that if any one of the four of us wants to stop this,
right,
then it's off.
Okay.
And I think later on at the end of this year and off year that I might have been guilty about not abiding by that.
Right.
Because I had gone so far mentally.
Right.
Even though we went
You were
back,
all in. Right.
I was all in, and I really found out on a trip to Boston in an airplane. I was doing the hockey color with John Sterling for the New York Raiders.
Yeah, there you go.
Excited.
Yeah.
It's been great.
It was real exciting.
Okay. So how long did it take before you guys swapped houses, wives, dogs, cars, and kids? When did that happen?
Well, on that trip,
Yeah.
on that plane, I really didn't care if it went down or not. The plane. It was a rough flight, and
Really?
I said, I don't care. At that
you were
point,
willing to die right then and
Yeah, I
there.
was.
Because you felt ashamed of what you were doing?
No.
Or because you thought you'd live your life without what turned out to be your true love?
Right.
Because
that.
All right. See how I break it down, Boomer?
I see that.
Go ahead.
Right.
So what happened? The flight made it. You're still
So
with
I
us.
called Mike when we got to Boston.
Right.
And I said, Mike, who was back in Montana at the time with Susan, I said, hey, do you still want to go ahead with this? And he said yes.
Right.
So then I said, let's go.
Do it. And you're like, what a sucker. Wait till you move in with this
But you had to
broad.
talk with your wife first, though, right? You had to ask her.
No, I didn't.
Oh, she was in.
at
She was done with Fritz at that point.
She was actually,
doubt.
but she wanted me back at that time, the
Right.
poor thing, because I had all the college degrees and I had money. And
She wanted a little fling. You were probably
Yeah.
the first man that ever made love to her. She wanted to
hope
experience
so.
another man.
Break
She
it down.
experiences this other guy. It's
Break it
all
down.
crazy exciting
Yeah,
at
break
the
it
time.
down, break it down,
And then
baby.
when she looks at you versus Mike, she's like, you know what? He's lousy in bed. He'll be able to provide for me for the rest of my life.
You know what?
Ding dong.
I think you got
But
it.
at that point, you would fall in love with
Susan.
So you're good. Susan.
Yeah.
So you're good to go. And you and Susan are still together.
Absolutely.
37 years later, thank you.
Yes.
What about Kelkich? Is he still with your ex?
No, they never got married.
See?
And Mike is
Played that
married.
well.
Yeah, to a very nice lady that he met.
He's
in
remarried.
Texas. Oh yeah, a long
You
time
guys
ago.
friendly still or no?
Not really.
No, that's not.
Now, how about your ex-wife?
My ex-wife married a real nice man from New Jersey,
So
an
everybody's
insurance
happy.
executive here.
Everyone is happy.
I
Did
think
you guys
so.
ever make love all together in the same room, the four of you?
No.
That would have been cool.
Yeah.
That would have been cool.
No,
yeah, maybe
you know
add
what?
it to the movie, I don't
Actually, it wasn't what the media made it out to be, and that's another reason I wrote the book, is to
Right.
clarify some of those things.
What did the
Because-
media say it was?
Well, they said what you had alluded to.
It's
in
free
the
love,
60s.
wild
Right.
orgies
Yeah,
and
the
stuff.
the actual wife swapping thing and all that.
Right.
And I don't think ours was that.
Now, you swapped houses?
Yeah.
So you stayed in your house or you moved into
I
Susan's
moved
house?
into the one they were renting
Okay.
at the time.
Pets?
Yes.
So
Poodle,
you-
a poodle for a Bedlington Terrier.
So you traded dogs?
Yes.
You traded houses? You traded
Yes.
wives?
Yes.
Did you trade kids?
We did. The
How about
kids
that?
stayed with the mothers.
Okay,
Yeah,
because the
in
mom was
those
raised,
days.
the
So
dads
really,
weren't
the
around.
dads
Right.
were the ones who traded the kids, really.
That's right.
Now, did both sets have kids?
Yes.
So as the kids grew up, because this is obviously outlandish for its time, obviously.
Right.
How did the kids react to learning the story about how this all went down, or were they both raised in loving households, so it was no big deal to them?
No, it was probably a big deal overall.
Right.
Even to this day.
Right.
The
I
old-
would imagine that it would be tough to go to school, right? If it were out there in the press as it was.
It's possible.
Right.
With my kids, my boys out here in New Jersey.
Right.
But with
Fascinating.
Mike's girls, they used my name so that it wouldn't have a split family scenario back in the Midwest.
Okay.
Right.
So they never had to
Because
face any
you
of
sort
that.
of protect the kids
Yes,
and yourselves
exactly.
from. I mean, the idea at the time of swapping wives and kids is nuts.
Oh, yeah.
So you had to protect it and protect yourselves, right?
Right.
There you
now,
go.
personally, I didn't care to be protected because I had to go right out on the field and face it. Like
You knew
had
you were gonna
to
get
do
it anyway.
Right, yeah.
Right, and I got it big time. In fact, a full entire stadium from standing room booze.
Really?
Back in spring training when it first came out.
Right.
When we played the Mets, ironically. Maybe that's why I
That's
hate
why
them
you hate
again.
the Mets. Us Met fans booed you, huh?
Oh, my, yes. They booed me. And if they would have had an indoor stadium at the time, the walls would have caved in. It
There
was
you
just so
go.
loud.
And 37 years later, you have to admit, probably the best thing you ever did, right?
Oh, it is. It
I mean,
is.
she's the love of your life, your best friend, and you guys are
Yes.
healthy and still together, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, yeah, that still is. I think at one point Carton said, yeah, that was crazy at the time. No, it's still crazy. The thing that makes it a little bit less icky with the kids, though, and he, you heard Fritz Peterson admit there that, it wasn't a good thing for them growing up. Both sets of kids were 5 and 2. So especially the 2-year-olds probably didn't know what was going on. And I don't know how much, the 5-year-olds really understood at the time that, oh, hey, there's a new daddy here and we're in a new house. And, oh, God, that's kind of wild. But, yeah, they were both 5 and 2 at the time. Now, as you heard Peterson say, they stayed together, and they stayed together till his death in 2023. So he and Suzanne worked out. The other couple never married. Mike Kelkich never married Marilyn Peterson. And you heard Marilyn Peterson say she wanted to go back, but at that point it's too late. And that followed them for the rest of their lives. I mean, if that doesn't happen, neither one of them is remembered. Both of them were traded by the Yankees within a year or so. So that was their claim to fame. And, I just can't imagine it. They swapped wives, houses, and kids. And one of them said, yeah, this is not a good idea. But the other said, no. And that was Fritz Peterson's account of that. It's unimaginable to me. And I'm a grandfather now. I've lived a long time. Isaac, now that you've heard all the details here, what's your takeaway from all that?
Wow. just wow. Just thinking about at that time in the 70s that was going on. And I can only imagine if that was going on today. I know the Mavs fans probably want to feel they rather go through this than what they're feeling with
that's one way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and going through it today with social media, oh my God, And this hits the shouting shows on ESPN.
Yep.
Stephen A. Smith, who claims he's never been married. I think he has a couple of kids. But, what does he do with this story? Oh, my God.
Oh.
Hey, those days was just newspaper headlines. But that right, would you agree that's the wildest trade ever in the history of sports?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
has to be.
Yeah.
That takes the cake from everything.
At one point, there was some discussion about trading Joe DiMaggio for Ted Williams when baseball was what the NFL is now. Okay, that would have blown the lid off everything. But this one, oh, my God. And even, 52 years later, when things have changed, with, how people live together and, the social mores and all those things. It's still mind-blowing, right? If this happens today, it's still crazy. They swap wives and families and pets and houses. Crazy. Insane. Okay, we'll get to something a little bit more normal. The Senior PGA Championship is coming to town. It's coming to Congressional, and we will talk to Jackie Endsley, who is the championship director for the PGA, about that next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, we got a big event coming to town on Memorial Day weekend. It is the Senior PGA Championship, and it's going to take place at Congressional. Jackie Endsley is the championship director for the PGA of America, and she joins us now. Let me just make sure that the criteria is correct for this. You have to be 50 years old to play in this, 50 years old or older to play in the Senior PGA?
Hi, Andy. Yes, that is correct. PGA Tour Champions players must be 50 or older by the date of the championship to be in the field.
All right, I'm going to hit you with a wild hypothetical. You ready for this? Tiger Woods turns 50 years old this calendar year. It's at the end. It's December 30th. He loves Congressional. He's played in the U.S. Open there. When he held his own tournament that was connected to the military for 5 or 6 years, he held it at Congressional. He's spoken lovingly about playing there. If he were to call you and say, Jackie, I'm not quite 50 years old, but I'm going to be 50 years old, and I'd really like to play in this, could he get an exemption to do it?
That's a great question, Andy. Unfortunately, that would be something that our senior leadership would have to take into consideration. But I know that is one of those questions that comes up quite a bit. We would love to have Tiger Woods in the field. We will be excited to welcome him to the field once he does turn 50. But unfortunately for this year, since he doesn't meet that criteria, we'll have to hope for next year.
Well, if I were on the senior executive committee and this came up, it would take me a second and a half to say yes, right? I mean, what it would do for your attention, number one, number two, ticket sales, sponsorship. I mean, it would blow it through the roof, right?
Absolutely. No, if and when Tiger is ready to play in the Senior PGA Championship, we'll definitely welcome him with open arms.
Okay. And as I understand, you can use a cart, right?
You can if there is a medical exemption in order to qualify for that. We do have a couple players that will request that. So, yes.
And what's the criteria for that? A doctor has to examine you? How do you qualify to get a cart?
Yep, exactly. They just have to be able to provide criteria to us and prove to us that they will need that cart for their round.
Wow, because that might be an interesting call for Tiger. On one hand, he's very traditional and has I think when we had the controversy about the cart, 25 years ago, Casey, I forget his name, he had a leg issue and wanted to use a cart on the PGA Tour. I think he was against that. So that would be interesting. All right, let me get you off Tiger, and let's talk about the tournament. First of all, you got an unbelievable course to play it. What kind of names are we going to see in the field when this comes to town at the end of May?
Yeah, Andy, we're really looking forward to hosting our defending champion, Richard Bland, who won at Harbor Shores last year and also won the U.S. Senior Open Championship. So he had a heck of a year last year. Also, Padraig Harrington and Steve Stricker, two past Ryder Cup captains. Looking forward to having them in the field, as well as some other notable players as well.
Okay, and this, in terms of prize money, money these days is so insane. What's the comp on what it is to the PGA Tour? Is it half? I mean, what kind of prize money do you talk about for this?
So the purse this year will be around $3 million. And so the cut for the winner will be about 500 or so, 500,000 or so.
Okay, and that's I think major tournaments are going to be what are they? They're probably top money is $2 or $3 million, right? Something like that. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Amongst the 5 senior PGA champion or senior tours events, yes.
Certainly makes it worthwhile, no matter how much money you have. What is the draw of Congressional meant? Such a historic golf course in Washington D.C., nation's capital. Has that helped you with who you've been able to attract in the field?
Absolutely. We have a partnership with Congressional Country Club at the PGA of America. We're very proud of our partnership with them that we started back in 2018. We did host the 2022 KPMG Women's PGA Championship. Now this is the second major we'll be hosting, culminating with the 2030 PGA Championship and 2037 Ryder Cup. And as you know, the blue course has been extensively redone and it's in championship condition. So we can't wait for these players to take their chance at winning a major championship.
And this is, I assume it works the same way as major championships on the PGA Tour. Do you have to win a certain number of tournaments to qualify? How does that work?
So there are certain criterion that will allow them to play. Anyone that has won a major in the past will be exempted into it. So looking forward to having them out.
Is there a way to qualify if you don't have those credentials? Are there qualifying tournaments to get into this?
So we do have exemptions. If there are any players looking for exemptions, we will grant those. We have had a few players reach out and ask for an exemption. But there are other events that they do have to win in order to qualify. We're talking to Jackie Endsley, who is the championship director of PGA America. The Senior PGA Championship is coming to Congressional on Memorial Day weekend. That'll be May 22nd through the 25th. And the prices. I'm looking at these prices. These are great prices for the tournament. And military people get special prices. Correct? Yeah, absolutely. So we have tickets starting as low as $49 for a single day of attending the championship, or if you'd like to come any day you'd prefer, those tickets start at $59, which provides some flexibility for spectators. And you're exactly right, Andy. Military do receive complimentary access for them and a guest. So really excited to support the military. And for major championships, particularly the Masters, you have some of the old-time championships who are ceremonial teeing off, like Gary Player and Jack Nicklaus. Will there be anybody like that for this event? Right now, Andy, still too early to tell. I know the field is still being created, so we're hopeful to have our preliminary field list by the end of April, so a few weeks out from the championship. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is a great time of year. It was great in the days that we had regular tournaments here, either at Congressional or Avenel. I always look forward to that over the years. If people want to buy tickets to this, how do they do it? Yeah, absolutely. So if they want to visit our website, they can visit srpgachampionship.com/tickets. So they'll find all the ticket information on our website. In addition, we do still have a few volunteer opportunities available for anyone that does want to volunteer. And we do have some limited pro-am groups available. If anybody wants to play with a PGA Tour Champions player, they're welcome to take a look at our website and find out more information. So that would be what, the day before, the 21st for that? Yep. Okay. Well, the pro-am is on Tuesday, May 20th. Okay. This sounds great. Looking forward to this. It's a big event. It's at a great golf course, and hopefully the weather cooperates. Maybe we've the winter we've had hopefully gets all the bad stuff out of here, because when you have great weather at that time of year, it's just a great event. Thank you, Jackie. Best of luck with this, and if Tiger calls, let us know. All right. Absolutely, Andy. Thanks for having me. Good to talk to you. Thanks very much. So yeah, that would be a cool thing. I mean, it's like I'm Tiger Woods. I'm interested in playing. I'm not quite old enough to do that, and that's going to be another interesting angle on this. What happens when he is old enough to play on the senior tour next year, which would be 2026, and would he use a cart? I think if Tiger could use a cart, he would win the Masters. I believe that.
Because if you watch not that I know golf inside and out, but if you watch what's happened to him in the last few years, he plays well enough to make the cut the first couple of days, but his legs just give out on him. He's got a team of people working on him too. I mean, he gets off the golf course and right away they start working on his legs, but he's just had so many injuries that holding up over 4 days and walking the course. I believe the number is when you walk 18 holes, it's about 7 miles. And, 7 miles along with heat and everything else and what you have to deal with. I don't know, if he's physically capable of doing that. But if he gets a cart and as competitive as he is, you never know. You never know what's going to happen. All right, that's enough for me today. Bram is coming up next. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.